I'm Daniel. I head the protocols team at Stakefish.
I'm Avril, and I'm community manager at P2P and Neutron.
I'm Vasily. I'm CTO of P2P.
I'm Dmitry, head of product P2P.
Hi, I'm Dimi, protocol specialist at Stakefish.
Teddy, also protocol specialist at Stakefish.
I'm Marina. I'm Chief Business Development Officer at Settle1.
I'm Othman, protocol specialist at Chainflow.
Hey, I'm Zach. I'm from Stake and Relax Validator.
I'm Will, co-founder at Binary Holdings.
Hi, I'm Alina, segment lead from Everstake.
Hi everyone, my name is Bogdan. I am a CEO at Everstake.
Hi, I'm Chris, the founder of Chainflow.
There were some people from Chorus One. We have P2P, but so this Validator Commons, we've been having some of these workshops. We had initially started as a group of a few validators that were focused on governance. We came together and we had this idea of hey, we need to establish some standards in this sort of Wild West that's going on in the governance space at the L1 level. So we called over, I think, Ted, if you scroll down, we have a few of the validators. So we had Stakefish, Chorus One, Chainflow, Figment, Metagov, who does a lot of this moderation for us. And we came together and we started talking. Obviously it could have been a much broader validator set, but we were saying, hey, if we can kind of come up with some standard technical or qualitative standard to figure out how to better have governance on these chains that we validate on together, maybe there's something we can present to the rest of these POS ecosystems of maybe this makes sense, because we had been quite broad across a lot of these other chains. Because what we had actually been seeing is, some chains would try to implement something for their governance that another chain that we had also validated on had already solved or had run into issues with. We quickly realized that we were coming from a particularly authoritarian approach, where we thought we knew what was best for these ecosystems, which is not really in the ethos of the decentralization or this type of principle. So then we pivoted into this concept of, and I think I was talking to a few of you about this, but this coalition or this gathering, or even what some would say a political party, where we can have very strongly opinionated ideas or principles that we believe in, that we can collectively kind of work on together, and then also provide the existence of what I think some would say an other, right? If you have very strongly opinionated ideas that you can push together in this governance space when it comes to either infrastructure or even community-related upgrades, then we can vote that way that would support that in the direction that the validators are supposed to be guiding these ecosystems. If the purpose of the validators, our existence, is to guide and then take the responsibility of running these chains after the foundations have ideally dissolved, right? Because we don't necessarily want these foundations leading the charge in the future. So we established something like this. We started having talks, just very casual, informal conversations to kind of iterate on this and add more ideals, but also leave room for existing other ideas to form their own, right? So if you have something that comes first, people would say oh, are you just monopolizing this? But you can also have a template that people can take. So if some people don't, for example, in an extreme case, if we value self-sovereignty and we always want to support that type of self-sovereignty in the way that we vote, or the way that these chains are developed, and someone else doesn't, for example, right? Then they can create their own group, right? They can go their own way. So that's kind of where these discussions have been coming from. And for a bit of history, I don't think there have been too many validators that had actually started meeting together. And we did have some qualms about this concept of, okay, if we are all in this closed room together, are we colluding? But then if we don't, then there isn't a lot of meaningful organization happening or collaboration or cooperation. So we just said, screw it. We met for the first time last September at Masari Mainnet. We just introduced each other, and then we just started having more of these at these conferences where we were all gathered. So the next one was in Lisbon, where a bunch of you, I think some of you guys had come. And at Lisbon, we just did 6 hours of workshopping, where we just we had these whiteboards. We wrote down everything that we as validators had seen as these problems, right? from everything from like the standards or lack of standards or frameworks that we had seen on these POS chains, all the way to these points of like validators can't take vacations because like we have to like maintain complete uptime. Like there's no way that we can scale like this with all these new chains coming out. And then we had another one in Austin, and we had actually, after that Lisbon gathering in November last year, we started meeting weekly in MetaGov, which I think Josh Tan is on like a video call with us. We'll soon describe formalizing this. And then so like we did the one in Austin, and then now we're trying to like, right, these different locations allow for more flexible travel. So there's like validators that are based in Europe that don't necessarily come to America. So that's a bit about like the context, and I think I did share a bit about this with you guys when I interacted with you, but I really want to get into like the story of what had happened. I think Teddy can explain a lot of like the philosophy and like the political aspect of this, but I think this is definitely should be an open discussion because we need to figure out, right, if we don't, we get a lot of examples like what happened with Terra, a lot of other blockchains that are either shutting down or having a lot of this type of interesting governance that we might not want to have. So,
my soapbox to stand on is that blockchains are fundamentally about governance, and that running a currency within them, and then a smart contract platform, depending on the specific chain and its features, is an extension of that governance, or it exists within the sphere that the governance of the chain defines. And so if people start to view chains this way, not just as this technology or sort of economics innovation, but also as a political innovation, then I think it's going to come into focus the fact that validators are so core to the future of the blockchain industry. It's already written in the code that validators have control over blockchains. I mean, they are the administrators of the chain. And the reality of leadership and governance right now is one where validators do not play a large role, or relatively a large role, compared to foundations when it comes to defining the future of the blockchains they validate. And so we're sort of trying to get people in the same room to take baby steps towards this sort of vision of more democratic governance within the blockchain ecosystem and more resilient governance just in general. So yeah, that's my piece. Yeah, so the main product of this working group that we called together to, I guess, declare Validator Commons was this Commons Declaration, where we basically define what unites us. And we tried to take an approach where we would mostly focus on sort of foundational political principles around caring about governance and participating, essentially. So I'll just go through and read them so that they, I guess they're known. We believe that governance matters, that proof-of-stake governance requires the participation of three essential entities: the token holders who delegate their tokens, the validators who stake them, and the foundations or core teams supporting the protocol. So yes, the idea here is not that this will become this validators only organization, in the same way that a traditional political party is an organization that doesn't only include politicians, it includes voters and other interests in a state. The Validator Commons is aiming to be similarly open to all members and very much oriented around a specific set of values. So the second point is the token holders are the fundamental source of power in these protocols, and they vest that power in validators. So this is this references traditional political philosophy, where we say that and I guess the actual code philosophy of these proof of stake chains, where we say that we are actually representatives. We are not sort of powerful by fiat. We're powerful because token holders delegate to us. With power comes responsibility. Validators are responsible to both their delegators and to the network as a whole. So this is sort of a dual mandate where validators have to balance these two, I guess, spheres of identity. I guess this is the theory of political science when it comes down to it. How do you balance the individual versus the group? And each validator has to make trade-offs when it comes to that. But at least we try to acknowledge that trade-off. Foundations and core teams represent a centralized and undemocratic executive power. So this is probably our spiciest statement, but we believe it wholeheartedly, which is why we put in the declaration. The idea is that the foundations represent the training wheels of these blockchains, which would not exist without them, but for which the future of these chains depends on them sort of stepping out of the center of the ring and moving towards a more democratic and decentralized process of governance. So for us to say this, I think hopefully should create some kind of response in foundation teams, which might view things as sufficiently decentralized right now, but we would disagree. The next one is, by participating in governance, validators provide an essential check on that power. Our role is to I guess, believe in the power of our governance and to actively govern. Second to last, delegators deserve to be informed of decisions taken on their behalf. So this was actually a big one that was originally going into the standard, which was that we saw that a lot of validators were voting, but they weren't necessarily communicating how they were voting. And just from like a gut perspective, we were saying, oh, all validators should always communicate. Rather than putting that in like a broad standard, we're putting this in our platform so that if validators wish to join the Validator Commons, then there'll be sort of some expectation of communication with their delegators on how they vote. And then the last one is, or second to last one, validators should be able to articulate their values to token holders, to foundations, and core teams, and to themselves. So I think just because we're declaring a set of values as a cryptopolitical party does not mean validators themselves can't have their own values. These values generally are a lot more like foundational and don't necessarily define specific direction enough for any given validator to operate. So the idea is that we would hope that in good faith validators would very honestly and openly describe their values to their constituents. And then finally, values matter, which is sort of like a meta level statement about how blockchain is a industry that is meaningful and should operate on the basis of principles and not just some kind of broad definition of existence, like, oh, well, blockchains exist because they exist. Well, no, they exist because people decide to make them exist, and they can be, steered in any direction. That's the Commons Declaration, and we would love to hear from all of you on, I guess, your feedback and your, your thoughts on to what degree you feel like this is something that is needed in the industry or not needed, or whether you feel like it makes sense to you that coordination is a good thing within the right framework, or whether you feel like decentralization is already quite far along and that we don't need to push it along further. Open to all thoughts. So if anybody,
even just like disagreements, right? Because you are also
Yeah.
very foundational focus on it. also run a validator. Yeah,
I guess also for context, so one is I co-founded Binary Holdings, and so we run a lot of validators in the Cosmos space, but also my day job is actually working at Parity, and I have a funny title called Master of Validators, and it's my actual job title. It's actually on my passport, which is really funny, always going through customs and borders and stuff. But a lot of what I spend my time doing is actually just onboarding validators into that space, and it's interesting just kind of getting the whole kind of wide range of people that are interested in doing things, just big financial institutions, banks, large companies, but also just kind of smaller independent people. It's sometimes one person things, kind of smaller dev shops, that kind of thing. And it seems almost kind of a lot of people have kind of some misconceptions, at least when they first get into the space of doing this, that running validators is kind of just the technical part of things. It's only just okay, I have a server, I'm going to get this up and running, I need to make this reliable and produce blocks and all this kind of stuff. But it's so much more than that. It's a lot of the things that you need to do, the roles and responsibilities are okay, you need to build up kind of your own brand, your own kind of reputation, and it's also about very much about community building, because it's for validators, it's one of the biggest parts of this is also just kind of building a community around kind of yourself and you as kind of a service provider sort of. And to me, one of the biggest parts of community building is actually just kind of culture. It's kind of you want to kind of cultivate your community based on kind of shared values and similar kind of ways of thinking sort of. And the way that I think about this is that at least in the blockchain space, I feel the reason why a lot of us are here is, as opposed to other industries, is just because the culture of blockchain things is just really interesting and really important. It's philosophically, it's kind of the values behind a lot of these things, I think, are one of the biggest motivating driving factors, at least for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. And I think kind of in this process of community building, and actually kind of working with people that are delegators, that people you kind of work with, and just kind of the broader ecosystem as a whole, being explicit about those values and being explicit about kind of okay, philosophically, where do you kind of stand and where do you kind of actually fit into the bigger picture of all these things. I think that is definitely super important. And one thing that I've seen that I've liked really recently was Polkachu on their website. They have this section of all the governance things. It's here's what I voted on and here's why I voted for it. It's kind of very transparently explicit of kind of where they stand on things, and it's kind of you can see kind of a good historical almost track record of here's all these different things. And so to me, I really appreciate that. And I would love to see kind of more things similar to that. And so just is I guess talking point of sorts, how do you all kind of think of ways that you can better facilitate being I guess transparent about these things, or kind of express kind of these viewpoints and kind of the philosophical parts of these things? Because I'm sure as people kind of build their own validators, people have their own kind of communication mediums, their own kind of ways that they kind of go about this. Some people post on Twitter a lot, some people have their own Telegram channels and Discords and stuff like this. But unless you're a part of kind of the community about these things, you may not know about this, or it's maybe these things aren't on people's websites or whatever. But is there anything people have seen that's really good in this regard of good ways to actually kind of be explicit about kind of values and kind of the ideologies and that kind of thing?
I think I have. I remember I was moderating a panel at Mainnet Masari, and we had Staked on and a few other validators, and I think at that time no validators actively kind of contributing to their community what they were voting on and why they voted on it. And I did kind of call Tim out, and then all of a sudden I think they started. I don't think Stake did, but a few other validators started. But with the communication that happens from the Polkadot side, even if there is that type of communication that we as validators do, and our delegators, right, we have no way of actually knowing who we're communicating with, right? These are all anonymous or pseudo-anonymous. From let's say your if you have your foundation hat on, what do you want to see from validators and also your staker community from what you had designed in the beginning? Because I think earlier on, a few of us were talking like, hey, even if like the stakeholders were supposed to, the stakers were supposed to hold validators accountable, we actually don't see that in reality. I don't think there have been many, or maybe some people have had these experiences where if you have delegators like communicating with you like, hey, like why did you vote on this, or can you vote this way? But that assumption in reality I don't think actually happens. But maybe that's particularly around the Cosmos side as well, but you also have like the from your foundation master of validators what you want to see. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I guess, well, it's been really interesting just in the whole process of just like, for us, like launching like Polkadot and Kusama and stuff. And it was like, originally, well, I'm sure this is the process for other kind of like teams and foundations as well, but like the community kind of like looks to you as like an authority figure. And it's kind of like the community kind of like looks to you to be kind of like, okay, like how should we do this? Like what is kind of the role of this, or kind of like how should we kind of like think about these things? And to me, like I just really appreciate the Cosmos space of how kind of how empowered other people are to like build a lot of things. Because like this didn't happen, at least in the Polkadot space, just in the sense of like people building like dashboards, like UIs, like apps, like these kinds of things. It's a lot more common, at least in like the Cosmos ecosystem, that it's like all the core like pieces of infrastructure, whether it's like block explorers, like those kinds of things, like those are like built and run by validators. And so I think it's kind of this thing where it's just like you need to empower the community, and you need to be able to like empower kind of like everyone around you to be able to have, I guess, like the right resources and the right kind of like it's kind of like actually being explicit about kind of like the power dynamics, sort of, where it's kind of like if you really want to like have the community kind of like be more part of things, it's like ask them for feedback. I think like ask them for like, okay, like how should we do this? Like not kind of like be this like authoritarian thing of like, okay, here's the way it should be. Here's kind of like what we're doing, that kind of thing. And so I think it's just like it's a lot about communication. I think it's just kind of like you need to be kind of like tell people like here's what we're thinking. Here's kind of like the way that we approach this. Those sorts of things, and I think at least for foundations and teams, that's like one of those things where it's like you don't really know to do that unless like it's like one of those things that's kind of like learned. It's like you can't like just tell people, hey, just do this, but it's like over time like experience kind of shows that. But yeah, I don't know, any responses to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think so many of the foundations also do it for the first time, right? They learn as they go. And we have established a lot more best practices actually in the Cosmos ecosystem, especially for how to do certain things, how to get people involved. Like I think especially like Figment, for example, did some work, Gavin, early to establish like how do you write a governance proposal. But many people don't take it upon themselves. They think like they want to participate in governance, but what they mean is like maybe we vote once or twice a year, and if someone pings me, I vote, but it's not really engaging from the standpoint of like, I need to like be proactive and kind of try to change something. There's very few that actually take that approach, and many like take whatever is fed to them from the foundation. And the foundation is kind of, if it's a good project, right, they will take the feedback like you said, and will try to engage the parties that will in the end work with the system and at least take the feedback and then make choices based on that, but many just go top down. Also because I guess, it's very new and they didn't even know who are the stakeholders that we should be talking to, right? And Cosmos is a bit more explicit because, you have the validators and they have the voting power in the end, so you kind of know who to speak to, but then many of the validators didn't actually have teams that are focused on this, right? Like I think we're starting, like the organization's getting bigger, we have like parts of us focusing, like I guess for a while, like everyone just did it because it's like on the side, but now I think it's becoming like a core piece of the business, and I guess I don't know where to go from here.
I think like yeah.
I'm going to speak real quick because I'll have to leave soon to give a talk. So basically, to give my perspective on this, like I'm besides being a like P2P Validator CTO, also incubated a DAO basically. So have a like a bit of perspective from the other side here, from the team side. 90% of governance is mid-space thing. Like voting is the last 10%. It's important. It's like the final seal of approval or disapproval or something. But like governance happens in mid-space with people talking, people designing stuff, people actually carrying out the development, the work, etc. And to participate in governance is actually to participate in mid-space thing. If you participate in last 10% by requiring, for example, like pushing for better voting, which is very often seen on governance forum, like this proposal is vote better. Like I don't vote for it, but don't participate in 90% of like mid-space work. It's like it's not always helping and can be actually detrimental to the process because like if you experience voter apathy for validators, which is quite often, you can imagine how teams and folks who contribute like actual efforts for months on it, how they experience it. Like they need to face a faceless crowd that kinda only starts engaging in the last moment, and you don't know how it works. Like it's of course a burden of having a decentralized project to be able to understand the nuance and do temp checks, etc. But it's also quite hard, and it all fails to teams who actually push for some change, some action to be taken, and the voters basically take upon themselves the arbiter role that does not involve a lot of actually putting effort. So I think what needs to be done for like Validator Commons to be really, I think, for being much better than it's some kind of push for being in the trenches here, working on stuff not only on the last mile of the governance, but all the way from start to finish, proposing stuff, working on making it happen, participating in development, in marketing efforts and community building, stuff like that. So like without that, that's like not going to help much.
Thank you very much. So I agree with Vasily. Basically, right now, get step back. Definitely needed, but all of us know that at least someone have to be responsible for it. Because I stick to some rules that all validators have to be in one chat just to discuss everything. Basically the same as you propose. And I agree, totally agree. But as soon as we didn't have any responsible guy, at least one, nothing happened at all. Because all of us could be in the same chat, could be some discussing something, and then if there is no like any traction or if there is no any like stick rules that we have to do, nothing happened at all. First point. So first point, someone have to be responsible for all this stuff. Second point, everything totally different in a particular blockchain, because all blockchain are different. All blockchains have different governance like tools or current decisions, etc., etc. In some blockchain, we can see that 99% of guys even paying attention to any like governance stuff. Basically, the main model of it is that if someone from, as for example, Everstake delegators didn't like our vote, they easily can delegate to like redelegate to a P2P or Chorus or any other else. This is why it's the main important stuff. If we could come up with something like main rule and the main like could be a commons or any other foundations that have to manage all this stuff and explaining that everything have to be in this way, and we could discuss everything like in that time, it could work. But someone have to be responsible, and it cannot be responsible like 20 guys cannot be responsible, or 20 teams. No, it's impossible. At least one or two, yeah. So it's my main idea.
I have a question. Oh, yeah. Please go first.
No, it's okay. You can have a question.
So I remember I saw, like Everstake, you guys are like so popular, and then you guys have a lot of like engagement on Twitter. I remember there were some attempts when we were trying to communicate, like as Vasily was saying, like we're facing like a faceless crowd sometimes, and we don't know how to like engage directly. Like we don't KYC all our delegators, so we don't know. Maybe there are some validators that have only institutional kind of delegators, so they know exactly. But then sometimes our attempts are like, how do we find out what they want to vote on or what they want us to vote on? And you guys, I remember you guys had a Twitter poll and you're like, oh, what should we vote on? Like, and then and a lot of people said like, yes to something, and then like I think maybe you guys voted no or something like that. But then it's like there was no way to like figure out if the people who voted were actually stakers of Everstake. But maybe you can talk.
Yeah. It was some stuff that there is like proposal. We decided let's check like how Twitter works in this way. So it was maybe speaking about it was Tezos or Cosmos. That doesn't matter. It was Tezos maybe. So speaking about Tezos, Everstake has like 55,000 delegators. Like if we combine all this 55,000, it will be 35 million of XTZ. Then you take a look at like a Twitter pool after all this voting process. It was 122 guys who voted yes. Then you take a look at the statistics and the Twitter statistic, and it means that 95 or 96% of these guys who voted yes was like not even our subscribers. So then we decided like making some research, and then we voted no. So basically we are doing some tricky, shitty stuff because they voted yes and we voted no. So this is the only way, the only decision how to do that. Everything have to be on chain. So all these 55,000 guys have to vote on chain. Only in this way we could track the real guys who like support or didn't support. That's all. We tried different stuff. Things that happen with the Polkadot is awesome because like UI is not so good, but anyway. But anyway.
Everybody agrees it's the worst.
Yeah, but system like how it designed it, okay, because I could almost easily to connect my wallet, and vote but there is something like on Cosmos, there is nothing like on Tezos, only for validators, but nothing like for delegators. So it's impossible to create like some combined tool for all blockchains, of course, but we could do it by chain, so something like that.
That's just a definitely wonderful topic you touched upon, because the community should be kind of educated about the governance. Because from what we've seen, it's actually that nobody really cares that much unless it's an incentive from any kind of airdrops. See, like people started to vote on various proposals just to get their drop in future. But in any case, what I think Validator Commons can possibly do is the education as well as a good communication. So, and on a side point that I was wondering if I can touch upon this, but standards should be implied into like any kind of proposal as well as any kind of a communication from the validator side. Because what Everstake started to do, like back in today's, we've been validating Tezos for over 4 years, I guess, right? And they started to say publicly on how they voted, on why they voted. And then gradually some validators started to take on this practice. This is what we've done personally. And after some time, we actually came up with the idea to create a kind of a standard thing that we can look on. It was made easier for us, actually. And then we shared that publicly. So we created a kind of a governance constitution on how we work. So if yes points are not met, we're voting no, or we're voting abstain in case it's something we want to encourage the community to vote on. And that's like the point when we actually have to to educate the community. In case the community really knows what we are talking about, they can make their own decision. And luckily, Cosmos gives us an opportunity to vote, and this vote is overriding anything like the validator is thinking about. And the point of validator is to provide this kind of a flow when the user, when the staker actually knows what's going on, what's the proposal is about. Because sometimes the lack of clarity and how the lack of clarity can be solved. what we supposed to do actually, it's actually a good idea to create a kind of a standardization for proposers to explain it all to community, and for the validators to get stated opinion. So if Validator Commons has a kind of a standard that we can just share and sign on, it will be easier for us to come and explain the specific vote on each and every proposal, thus educating community, thus communicating everything, like remaining the privacy, as the lovely guy was mentioning. So, and also the proposers, builders, whatever contributors who are coming to the Cosmos ecosystem will be able to actually find the way to get the audience the right sense of what they're building. So
just to play devil's advocate, because I agree exactly with what you're saying, but what if we do all that and we educate them and they don't care?
No, that's definitely the thing, but it will still be more like transparent in a sense. So we've been doing everything on our sides, but at least when someone comes to us and asks like, why the hell you voted no on this proposal? We say the use of precedence is unclear. Like nobody communicated that, and as like validators are the ones who are responsible for the things happening on chain, we can do it ourselves. But at least we try to educate them all. See, and we will have the direct standard and direct statement on how we made this vote. So this is just. I'm sorry, I'm experiencing severe allergy, so yeah, sorry for my voice.
One more stuff they really care. As soon as there is proposal, something about decrease the APR in a few times, they definitely don't care. So
that's the most battle.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot to be done when it comes to like separating out proposals that people do care about from proposals that people don't. Dimi at Juno is thinking a lot about sub-DAOs within the DAO governance of Juno, and how these sort of subcommittees can be used to, I guess, increase the signal and decrease the noise when it comes to global level proposals, so that every proposal hopefully is something that can get people's attention. And these kinds of, I guess, evolutions of how the governments are designed are changes that we can advocate for as a collective group. And then also to speak to your point about how Validator Commons or any kind of like affiliation of validators could, I guess, band together to try to educate the community about proposals. It seems like this is just a general theme of what we've heard from people in feedback, that like there are a lot of things that validators would do if they could sort of like share the cost of doing that thing with other validators. So sort of like collective action from tooling, which I think he left, but he mentioned, and staking rewards, yeah. And then just like writing and like keeping the community up to date on proposals. I think right now, one big question we have is like, how exactly should we start to think about like that kind of collective action? Because right now we have a Notion website and we have MetaGov very generously sort of providing some kind of financial support when it comes to taking notes, and like we're using their Zoom. And they have a few academics like thinking about these problems, but we're probably going to need to upgrade to a more official organization structure where we have some money to spend and some like formal process for getting things done. But that's sort of totally an area of blue sky research right now, especially given that we're starting this organization at the very least as like a chain agnostic organization that's more oriented around validators than any specific chain. And so there's a ton of questions here. Should we have this be an umbrella organization and then have sub-organizations for each chain? Should we think about our role as being more like advocacy? So like we might submit proposals to get grants from foundations for specific tooling that we think needs to exist. Or we might try to get a grant to ourselves and then from there delegate again. I think there's just like this huge design space of like, how should we organize? How should we act collectively, especially within the parameters of governance?
I actually want to pose a question to maybe Othman, so like for Chainflow, because like I think most, if not all of us here represent validators that are enormously powerful. We're a lot of very large professional validators that have a lot of stake. And I do, and like, so we have like kind of, maybe if people see like, oh, like you guys like P2P, like Chorus One, Stakefish, Everstake, like all you guys are like in this room now, like what the hell are you guys doing? We've seen like validator organizations that cropped up. I think maybe there was like, specifically in Cosmos, I'd seen like, and really love them. I talk a lot with them. I heard of like these organizations that had been created saying like, hey, we're smaller validators. We want to cut down the big guys. Like it was actively like, we want to take them down. And then it obviously transitioned into more like data availability and analytics and stuff to provide for that. There's also like the Staking Defense League that I think Chainflow had been working on with Throwback Labs. But from that perspective, like there's like maybe active or aggro style organization versus like we are also trying to help. But I'd really be curious to hear from like from your end too.
Yeah, so since we're like a bit smaller, I feel like we don't take the approach of like trying to cut down the big guys, but more so uplift the smaller guys, which is what like, the Staking Defense League is for. And we also, in terms of education, we really push like our values, and like how you mentioned to Everstake, like you wanted to see what the community wanted to vote. Instead, we tell our community, okay, we educate them on it. These are our values, and this is how we will vote generally. And then we have that transparency. And it's actually pretty cool because we do get a lot of feedback up to the point, like every week we show how we vote, why we vote. Every quarter, we even break down the statistics of how we voted on each network, and in total, if the percentage went up or down, what was the reason, and internally it helps as well. And I feel like giving the values first and then just putting that first and having your stakers, your delegators decide, okay, we do agree with it, so we'll stay with you, or we don't agree with it, and we'll just leave. It makes it easier to kind of work with them and then continue getting feedback, essentially. But we also join things like the Validator Commons to, talk to the bigger, validators, and then speak up for the more independent validators. Like, okay, this is kind of the issues they're facing because you guys might not necessarily face those issues. For example, you guys are facing more issues of maybe communication we were talking about before, but communication on our front is kind of good because, there's a decent amount of delegators, and now we're getting feedback, oh, maybe we should create a Discord instead. So that's the mode of communication that everyone wants to use. So it's honestly just having larger validators listen and then continue to spread the word, which is honestly why we joined the Validator Commons, because as you can see, we're aligned in like the foundational portion of things.
So just as a part of, I guess just to elaborate more experiences in the kind of like this like Polkadot world of things, like a lot of my time is actually just spent kind of like thinking about how to help more like independent validators kind of like succeed in things, just because like I help like onboard people, I help people get like up and running, and it's actually really interesting just in the Polkadot space, just because like independent validators there actually just like really don't like larger validators like P2P and Figment and stuff, just because like they see this as kind of it's like they're taking away like their opportunities in some ways. And for me, I think a lot of where this kind of like sentiment kind of comes from is that like they like newer people or like newer like independent validators just don't have as much kind of like opportunities because they might not have kind of like the resources that these kind of like bigger validators might have, just in the sense of like I guess resources, maybe like money, maybe funding, a lot of those kinds of things. And for me, I think what a lot of more independent validators kind of need is just a lot more kind of hand-holding through the process of knowing like, okay, what is kind of the things that like we should be doing? Like how do we actually kind of like get up and running with finding people to like delegate to us? How do we kind of actually go about communicating things? It's like if people are just kind of like starting in this space, or if they're even just kind of like smaller, it's kind of like they don't really know as much about kind of like what the standards are, or at least kind of like what the best practices are. It's like, how do you run a Twitter? How do you do like marketing? How do you kind of like build your brand and this like reputation and this kind of thing? And so to me, I think kind of like what a lot of like larger validators can do to help more smaller independent validators is to like work with them a little bit in providing resources that are like, okay, here's how we did things. Here's like what was successful for us. Like, I guess just kind of like sharing experiences and sharing kind of like how these larger validators got to the point where they kind of, where they are like now, more or less. And to me, it's like a mix of like education, a mix of communication, but also just kind of like working with people as well. Like just kind of like being in the same kind of like chat rooms, like participating in the same kind of discussions. And that's why I really like kind of like initiatives like this, where it's kind of like you can get a lot of people in the same room just like talking about like, okay, how can we improve this for like everyone sort of, and so.
Have you seen like, you're saying like smaller validators want to increase, like, have you seen it change much? Because you're saying like, how do smaller validators or independent become like larger? And I think even like Chainflow had put together some analysis on like what actually does happen over the course of time from inception of the chain to present, and if there actually is like an efficient market of redelegation happening depending on like what the validators have done. And I think like what you guys found is like it doesn't change, right? Even if like you were looking at like commission rates changing, the validator in the top set would get like a lot of foundation delegation. They got a lot of money off of the incentivized testnet or whatnot, and then they up their commission, and then people either just don't pay attention, they don't care, or it's not large enough of a commission hike that allows that money to like kind of trickle down to like to the rest. But like on Polkadot, have you seen like it's like the usual suspects, right?
Yeah.
And then we have now become like the overlords of all of these chains. The same us.
Yeah, I guess we'll also just like one thing that I help run is like I'm basically the person that helps control a lot of the like foundation delegations. So it's like if I'm kind of the person that is almost in charge of like helping a lot of these other independent validators succeed, and just because like like so many people are reliant on like parity and Web3 kind of stake to actually just get in the validator set and actually kind of like be a part of this. And it's also just interesting to see kind of like the differences in kind of like motivation for a lot of people. Like some people put in like a lot more effort than others, like some don't. I think one person in particular that is kind of very inspirational in this regard is like Pokechu, because like they started I think in the Polkadot space, and they actually like built out a lot of really nice tooling and UIs that I just didn't have the time to build. Do you mind if I actually like show this on this screen for a sec? No, this is actually in the context of like Cosmos stuff.
Live demo of Polkadot. Dangerous.
Share it out with Pokechu.
And so it's like for me, one thing that I think is like really just nice and interesting is like what I've seen them do really well and succeed in going from kind of like independent and kind of like from scratch to actually like they've been actually really successful in getting a lot of like Polkadot and Kusama like delegations. Just because like they've built out like a lot of tooling, they've built out like a lot of just really nice and useful, interesting things. Like if anyone needs to get like a new node up and running in like almost like any network, it's like you just download a database snapshot that they're hosting. And I think it's kind of like being able to kind of like build out kind of things like this, where it's kind of like to me, this is like very inspirational of like a kind of like a platform and like a structure for governance things. It's like it gives you kind of like this thing of like, okay, here's kind of like the rationale of like what we're voting on, why we're voting for it. It's kind of like this thing of like education of kind of like just giving people more context about these things. And I think like just not a lot of people that are starting out kind of like know about kind of this methodology. It's kind of like, I feel like what a lot of like validators did early on to like become bigger was like they built out like things that are actually useful. It's like they actually contributed back to the ecosystems. And I feel like a lot of people just don't know how to contribute back to things just like outside of the context of actually just like running nodes. And so to me, I think what like a lot of things that can be done are just kind of like helping people actually just like get a sense of like, okay, what is actually useful? Like, what would be nice to have like in the community? It's like, is it like tooling that would be nice? Is it kind of like blog post explaining things? I think resources like that, or at least kind of like helping people know about those kinds of things, like that to me is like things that would be useful.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about, right, we're kind of discussing what it takes to become a successful validator in a way, and just in the end, it's a business, right? And what did many of the big guys today do right? I guess first of all, being early and kind of committed to a certain ecosystem in some sense, and building the tooling. Like I guess many validators start out in one ecosystem, and then they start to think, okay, now we expand. I think the luck of the Cosmos ecosystem is that it's by designed to be like multi-chain. So you already have this thing in mind, oh, we have to go on multiple chains. I think others started in a certain ecosystem, like Polkadot, right? It has Polkadot in the name, and that kind of beginning can be a good strategy, I think, to kind of be committed to the community, get like some delegations there, build your brand, and then maybe expand. But that's what I would also advise, I guess, new validators to do more, right? Kind of commit to some newer ecosystem that is emerging and like really contribute there, and then be successful there, and then see how you can branch out from that specific ecosystem, or like also kind of find out what is the thing you can contribute that actually people find helpful. Like it can also be like a journey, right? You're just like, yeah, you're running the nodes, but then okay, what can we do? What is our strength? I guess here, for example, tooling is one example. It can just be like research, and in the end, it's a business, right? Like it's not like you're being handed things for free. You have to figure out how to make it work. But I think it can be done, and obviously, like we should encourage that. And the foundation work is also to kind of recognize the ones that are doing it and kind of help uplift them. But yeah, in the end, it's up on them to really make their business success in a way, in my opinion.
Yeah, so, and actually, I think we're detracting from the government discussion a little bit, but small validators is an exciting topic. So what I think, the feedback that I'm getting from the foundation teams in Cosmos is that they actually enjoy working with Cosmos validators a lot, because they come with some kind of a package often. And because in Cosmos, we work with many foundations, so we can have an opportunity to learn and see what actually is helpful for the foundation teams to grow their projects. And essentially, like many validators come with a set of things that will help the foundation teams. And these could be very different things. Like some of them are on the technical side, some of them are on the community side, and like many of them actually need some support in terms of dealing with the community. And I think that's where like smaller validators can figure out how they differentiate from the big guys. And like for instance, like a lot of big guys, I don't think we're not great at working with community, for instance. Like I think we're good at working on the B2B side, we're not great at working with B2C side. So that's an opportunity for someone else to actually take it over. And I think there's also always an opportunity to just find out what's where the foundation teams need help with whatever development. There's always so many gaps, because they need to develop faster than they can. So I mean, just asking the questions, what you guys what problems do you guys have right now and where we can help, I think it solves many issues sometimes when you need to collect stake from the foundation, for instance. Like you can ask them what's the issue that they take, and I'm sure that you appreciate it when the validators do it as well. So I think for validators there are lots of opportunities that are just not taken yet in the field. So Yeah, it's just like normal business. Like they're kind of bigger players, but they actually, if you think carefully about it, they work in particular niches. They are not like universally successful across the board. So you pick the area which is not serviced well, and you do it better than others, and that's it. And I think we have quite a few good examples. Like I like the example of France Validator, for instance. Like they have the unique take on that. Or my favorite is Larry from used to be a Terra Validator. Like he's a team of one, but he used to be quite a big validator actually. And yeah, I think an example of a very successful team of one. So yeah, I think we should have a big variety of validators to actually to have a successful set of validators.
I actually have a question, and maybe I'm not like purposefully trying to like pit you against like Chainflow, for example, in this example, but like, so I remember, so the context would be like, if there are a very diverse set of validator types, how can competition or actual competition for decentralization exist? And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, I remember I was talking to Vasily. So there was, as everyone is very familiar with, there's like the Lido growing too large, right? And so, right, P2P, you guys had helped largely like set Lido up. And now Lido controls over 90% of all staked Ethereum, and I think it's over almost 40% of all Ethereum in existence staked. There's 40 of the staked. Yeah. Yeah. And so like, and I remember, and I was talking to Vasily about this, and I'd actually helped like kind of proofread some of the stuff that he had put out in response to people saying like, hey, this is another 2014 Ghash moment where they had taken over 51% of Bitcoin mining hash rate. And then Ghash had voluntarily limited themselves. They said, hey, stop sending your hash power to us. And then I think a lot of people are now also expecting, they're saying, hey, P2P, like, curtail yourself. And then Vasily had like a pretty good point, and I think the most practical response of like, why should we limit ourselves as like this main like liquid staking provider when it's not going to be helpful or healthy for the future development of the chain? Because it can't come from like altruism where you're just limiting. It has to come from like this incentivized competition where like Rocket Pool, you had to get your shit together. That's why you're not as large as maybe as Lido was. Maybe there's obviously those capital efficiency issues that Rocket Pool had that they're now working on. But then, right, you guys said, no, we're not going to curtail ourselves because like it should come from competition. And in the case of like, if you now want to support that type of decentralization from a place of you have many different types of validator in that spectrum, and you want to have that, how can smaller validators of a very particular type of purpose, let's say, right, some people mentioned there's mercenary validators that just do contract work versus larger validator service providers that just run infra and don't do anything else, right? If the playing field is so uneven, how can we have that type of decentralization? Like, so how can like a smaller validator like also engage with like on the same like if you're fighting with like a full set of armor, right? And for the same, let's say the goal is to get stake versus someone who has like a loincloth and like a sling, like how is that even, how can that be fair for that type of decentralization to exist?
Okay.
But yeah,
So, well, first of all, I can't really speak on behalf of Lido because they're a separate company, and I'm not engaged on the Lido side of things. So yeah, yeah, we can bring Vasily back in a few, so he'll address that. But on the competition side, I think there are like, again, like comparing it to like normal businesses, so to say. So yes, there are companies that have their competitive advantages, but they also, like as I said, they would always go into some area of the market. Like they will not universally well service all the customers, right, or all the delegators in our case. And like an example, so when EVMOS staking was launched, like we're not a big validator on EVMOS because like normally we attract stake from B2B partners, and EVMOS tokens are distributed to small token holders, and we're like placed, I don't know, 50 across, maybe even lower across EVMOS validators. So I think, yeah, like in many cases, we just don't have this advantage. And I think that's basically same true for any bigger validator. And I think that decentralization comes from the fact that different delegators need different things from the validators, and we just like each of us have to figure out like what type of an audience we're working with and how we can service them better. I think like if every validator was like working with exactly the same type of a delegator, that would lead us to the point where there's just one best validator, because there is no kind of diversity of needs from delegator's perspective. But luckily, delegators are different, so I think that's basically the reason why we have the diversity of validators. Maybe am I answering your question? Oh, sorry.
So one thing that I guess I would want to know is, because kind of the way Chainflow works in some instances, when we like, you know, we're kind of a small validator, but when we get a lot of stake in certain networks, for example, regen, we would redelegate our stake to, you know, smaller independent validators that we think, you know, do good work for the community, or make tooling, or like on other networks just stop taking stake. And, you know, we're still, you know, alive, running well. So what's preventing larger validators from doing that when, you know, y'all will continue to grow and still have some, you know, have a lot of capital?
Yeah. Okay. Or I can ask now and then pass it to you. The answer, yeah. Oh, okay. So the way we think about it is like well, first we always try to see like if we get some funding from our staked assets, like what we can do for the community. Like we don't necessarily delegate to someone else. What we do is like we try to create something that helps the whole thing grow. So like basically we think that our responsibility is to help the projects that we work with grow and figure out any ways that we can come up with that will be helpful for the project that we're working with. So that's kind of the mindset. And then we're like constantly trying to find things that would be helpful for the community. And like it could be in different areas. Again, like it's not necessarily delegating, like directly delegating to the others. What we try to do is like create things that would make everyone in this ecosystem more successful. So that's kind of the approach. So yeah, like Neutron is an example. So like we think that Neutron is helpful for the Cosmos ecosystem in general. We think that we have the capability to deliver, and yeah, that's what we're trying to do to enable the growth for Cosmos Hub and the other chains on Cosmos. So that's kind of how we think of what's our responsibility and how we act on it. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you. I think first of all we have to clarify like what are the reasons that are like validators they're like super huge and have like 2 digits of percentage of the network, and why they're like smaller validators they can't go up, and like maybe also providing something and can't be even in the active set. So first of all, the first reason is like the user interface. If you go on Minscan, if you're like a normal delegator, you go there and like barely know what proof of stake is. You know that you have to stake your tokens, that you can fight inflation, and then you're even like in a higher percentile of understanding the blockchain and the POS. Then you click on delegates, and then you see like maybe 5 names, and then you just click on the first one that appeals nicest to you because you don't understand what's behind that. And then you select one, and then this validator becomes your favorite one, and then you just redelegate to this one, and that's it. So that's the first reason why they're like big validators, and they're becoming more and more big, because nobody goes on Minscan or like on Kepler and scrolling down on like, oh yeah, rank 68 is nice. They provide some cool things. I delegate to them. That's the first reason. The second reason is the delegated don't even have the chance to know which validator they should choose. If they go on the field, they just see names, and that's it. And if they like go ahead, they go maybe on 1 page or 2 page of validators, and then they read things, and then 1 or 2 sentences will catch them and say like, okay, I will vote to them. So I think there's a lack of tooling or lack of displaying what validators really contribute. So if you go on Kepler, for example, and would see like, okay, hey, Polkachu provides a lot of technical things for example, also for validators, and they provide tooling stuff. Okay, that's cool. If you go, for example, on the name Friends, you see maybe a green tag, they're doing community work. If you go to another one, they do maybe relayers and so on. So like maybe displaying the contribution to the network easier and make it more visible could be a step in the right future. And on the other step, if you go back in the proof of stake networks in the really beginnings, what is the task? What are the responsibilities of a validator in the beginning? It's just validating and confirming the transaction and keep sure that no malicious things gonna happen, right? And then this governance things came up, and if we now think, okay, hey, the delegator should usually do their due diligence and select their validator as like a kind of party. Okay, I trust this guy, he should vote for me. But in the end, it's the responsibility of the delegator to vote in these governance proposals. Okay, we have different governance proposals. We have some that the delegator can't even understand because he is not so far with technical things. And there comes the things from Demi comes to play with the sub-DAOs, where maybe the devs take part of the updates and that stuff. It's totally okay, but in the end, it's the responsibility also of the delegator to select the correct validator, maybe also spread and diversify, and keep active in your community, because that's in the end what you also want, right? You want the community that's active, that's keeping up with all governance proposals, they're supporting people, they really bring value to the network and really providing tools or other stuff. And I think that's where we should work on, and not like, hey, validators just like work together and vote for something, because we have to bring the delegates also on board.
Yeah, I was just gonna, a lot of that. I think it's kind of a fine line. You have like decentralization where you want everyone to be active and have that spread out of validators. But then you also want to keep it competitive, because for the network's sake, you don't want people to just be handheld and then all of a sudden they become 1%, but they really never learned how to actually be efficient at it. So I think, in terms of the commons, it'd be very helpful to really, I think, have a lot of educational stuff, right? Take it, if you can utilize it, then we know you're a good actor and you're really improving yourself. And then I think on the tooling as well, because I think validating, one thing is it's kind of capital intensive for a small person, and you don't want someone who in the long run could be a really good developer, a really good advocate for the space, get knocked out really early on by one mistake. So I think just being able to provide those kind of educations from you guys' perspective, which are big players in the space, and really be able to allow someone to get upstarted and kind of like get things that would help them not make that one mistake early on. I think then you can sort of build out and like filter through the robustness later on, which would be great.
And I think, I think you have to educate two sides, not just the delegators, also the validators, because like as you said, a lot of people want to start the validator business, but few really understand, hey, what is validating? They just know like, oh yeah, they got a part of my commission, they're making shit ton of money, that's it. But if somebody really wants to start validating, I just saw it myself. I did like research 4 months and wrote about POS, And now I just kickstarted my own validator. And if you don't come from the tech side, it's like incredibly hard. You know, okay, I have to do the community thing, I have to get the delegators on board. But from the technical side, if you're not from there, it's incredibly hard. And then you see like Polkachu, like that somehow helps with the toolings. And then, for example, I visited the validator school that helps onboarding new validators and show them, which also helps to decentralize the whole network, and which could be also a benefit. And like helping new validators to really understand and to grow, that brings value, I think, in the future.
I do want to say something real quick. I know Kevin from Throwback Labs, he has a whole guide on how to like start up your validator from his own experience, and also a podcast about like his journey through that. So I feel like that's coming from an independent validator. So he's doing that on top of just, running his own validator. So I feel like, yeah, from the larger validators, things like that would be very helpful.
So,
Dan, do you want to go first? Because I might change the direction.
Yeah, I'm actually curious, this is also directed to you, and then what you were saying, how, like, yes, we can, I know like different networks have different strategies where I know like Solana, they like hide the top 16 or whatever validators and they look at the rest. And then we had actually worked a lot with Haifa Co-op, who's doing a lot of this Cosmos Hub forum governance, where they're actually been paid by the community pool to start like policing the forums, right? Make sure that you have like the forums in a certain way, similar to how like we had seen MakerDAO do it pretty well. They were basically like enforcers, right? To make sure that things actually are formatted correctly and look right. And Haifa has now been circulating around to other validators and saying, hey, put together like a platform of what you represent, and then so that people have the ability to kind of see with what you were saying, right, what this validator is about. But the problem is like I feel like there's only so much differentiation that can happen. Let's say there are 130 or so validators on a network, and right, perhaps the most ideal distribution of power is perhaps equal. Maybe that's an idealistic way, or maybe that is not the ideal distribution of power of what token is staked with each, because you run into maybe there's too many chefs in the kitchen, or also people don't actually have the bandwidth to understand and go through each of those validators to also stake with them, or they maybe just prefer to stake with a top tier a top validator that already exists in that set. Right, our infrastructure management of these networks is relatively similar, right? Maybe some will do it on data centers or do it on cloud service providers or whatnot. But if that is the same, and then there's the differentiating factor, there's a handful of things. Maybe you do dev work, you contribute to the ecosystems, you participate in governance, you like give people fun like NFTs if you're part of the validator or something. But that is only so much, right? Like we'll all like kind of look somewhat similar. And from your case, like what would, let's say for Polkadot, like what would you want a complete equal division of all stake to different validators? Because there's only, because like, let's say that however many validators, right, that you can only have so much.
Yeah, so one way that I approach kind of the foundation delegation thing is that like it's actually all entirely automated, and so it's kind of this weird like algorithmic kind of like staking thing. What ends up happening is that as part of this like onboarding process for like this Polkadot ecosystem, when people kind of like sign up for this, they kind of like have their node actually like scored in a way that's kind of like want to figure out like, okay, what are the actual kind of like things that kind of like matter in the sense of like, okay, how do they contribute to decentralization? Like what data centers do they use? Like what cloud providers do they use? Are they like staking in a place where like there's already too many nodes? And then also it's like, how do they participate? Like, do they participate in governance? How consistent are they in participating in governance? A bunch of things like this. And so it's based on like all these different factors that kind of like a node gets scored that that determines kind of like how the stake actually kind of gets distributed. And so in this way, it's kind of like this almost kind of like self-reinforcing kind of loop of like people that actually really care about the things that matter, kind of like they end up getting kind of delegated to more often. And it becomes this thing where it like their score kind of becomes this way to kind of like differentiate things. And one thing that I've been working with the community more like with is actually kind of like determining how to actually like determine what is important for these things. So like the score of each thing is kind of like one part of this, but then there's also kind of like the weighting of the score. So it's like, okay, how much does like their own self bond of this matter compared to, I guess maybe it's like how much does kind of like the decentralization like location kind of part matter. And so right now it's like the community actually kind of deciding like which of these things is actually kind of like the waiting for this. And so to me, it's like eventually over time, what I would hope for this is that like people are able to then differentiate themselves based on like what they really kind of like care about. And so it's like they can kind of almost like choose your own adventure of like what things they really want to like focus on. So it's like if they really want to focus on something like this decentralization aspect, it's like they can like run their own node in their own kind of like remote location in this part of the world that like no one else is running it. And so they get like a super high score for that, and like maybe that's kind of like their edge compared to other people. And so like I'm kind of just continually trying to think of like other different ways that are kind of like quantifiable almost, and like it's not perfect. It's like it's not kind of like the end all be all for this, but it's like to me my approach has been like kind of almost taking like a quantitative way of doing this, just because like this way you can like automate a bunch of the structures for this, and this also gives like another kind of like thing that like someone coming to this like on like some UI or say it's like Kepler or like whatever it is, they can kind of see these things compared to just like, oh, how many like what is their rank in terms of like the total stake or whatever.
So one idea I've been playing around with is the idea that validators should just be evaluated on their governance and their infrastructure, and that's it. Like, is it possible that this idea that validators should contribute from a perspective of like building explorers and all this various other tooling based on their sort of willingness to contribute back to the industry, and as well as sort of like develop a brand for supporting the industry? Is that like possibly doing more harm than good from the perspective of like, I guess, perhaps incentivizing people to think about, or like setting a bad example where people might expect that, oh, if I want a block explorer, I just have to make one, and then like, you know, maybe I'll get a grant for it, maybe I won't, but like these things kind of just happen out of the good of the validators' hearts, versus like validators kind of owning that their main responsibility is infrastructure and governance, and then like if they wanted to build something on the side, then they might like do what a politician does, which is tries to get funding for it, and then maybe they could build it, or maybe some other contractor could build it, but kind of taking a more I don't know, I guess well-defined approach to governance could potentially lead to better outcomes where people kind of instinctually, like through muscle memory, start to go through this process where they say, okay, if something should exist, then somebody needs to advocate for it, try to get a proposal on chain, try to get a grant, you know, serve as like the foreman, like organizing the effort, rather than like, I think the grassroots stuff works really well in the beginning, but it ends up leading to these like problems where like collective action doesn't necessarily work as well. I think we might be sort of reaching the asymptote of like how well this like self-directed collective action is working when it comes to tooling in the validator space. And it might be the point where we want to say, okay, like which validator is going to like just try to get funding for it, like because it takes work to even get a proposal out and to figure out who should work on it and who's going to like where the accountability will be. Like I think if we start to think of our jobs as much more as like, administrators to the degree that we have stake, then we might be able to like potentially be a little bit more effective. This is one idea. I'm curious what other people think about this.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you mentioned that we kind of should disregard the contribution while making the choice, so it should be a whole different thing.
No, I don't think so. I just think like it's possible that
It's just one thing.
that model
Yeah, but-
is like is a little bit perverse, where like we're expecting validators to simultaneously, like people might get in their heads that validators are not just about governance and infrastructure, but they're also about, like, part of their core mission should be building tooling. And it's like, well, maybe not. It seems like the tooling is sort of like usually oriented around just trying to get more delegation and like contribute back to the community, which is like a little like ancillary.
Yeah, but actually, like, as coming from a builder perspective, so going on chain last time we tried to implement some features on this specific network. Like, we went on chain on secret network, and it was a whole awful experience for us. So a lot of builders are not going on chain for the because of the lack of the transparency of how that goes, like of how to communicate, because they have no like single common practices, like common experiences. So it should be like a process. And that's why I think the contribution should remain like in terms of the validator marketing, but in the same sense, we should kind of have a kind of aggregator, like an information on what validators are doing, because it should be like an explorer level. Because recently I was running a lecture on staking in Cosmos specifically, and guys I was just like mentioning, so you should ask the validator about the, like, you know, technical setup. So if anything is all right with his infrastructure and everything, so why is he having like zero commission or whatever? And the guys were just asking me, how can I get this information? And it should be like public in Explorer level. So once the delegators, this is what this guy was mentioning, so basically once the delegators reach the Explorer, they should have all the information public, thus they can make the right choice. And when they reach the Explorer, they also should have an idea on how to choose, like, what's the commission, what's the uptime, how the governance like votes rate are determined, like what they're doing. So it should be like a validator profile, if it makes sense. So and I believe that will be actually engaging more people, because as soon as people reach the proof of stake in general, like in a concept, they need to understand, they need to be more like savvy in a sense. So that was like my thought, and I was thinking about building a specific like aggregator of validators like profiles, but it just makes a lot more sense to build it on Explorer level. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with. I agree with all of that. I just think that when it comes to more technical work and, you know, building out infrastructure for governance, we can't just rely on the selfish or altruistic instinct of validators to drive that just from like a off-chain perspective. Like, I think it'd be interesting if we started to get much more in this mode of like, how do we always work together on tooling, because then and hopefully put things on chain in proposals, so that like we get in this habit of collective action. You know, yeah.
Thank you a lot. Yeah, I think it would be nice to have like a tag on the Explorer level where you want to stake, and then you see which validator provides in which field. Like, for example, dev could be purple, community could be green, and then you can already categorize which validator does what. And then you should also like help the delegator to make a clear decision. Like, each delegator should do their due diligence by selecting out a validator, but I don't think any validator, any delegator does this. You should check the uptime, you should check since when they're there, you should check how many governance proposals did they do. If you go on MinScan and check for the governance proposal, and if that's a really new validator, it says 0 out of, 50, because it's really new one. But it doesn't say like, hey, it just joined yesterday, so it can't even participate on the last 51. So this kind of stuff And you should have like a list to help the delegator. Hey, did you check these points by selecting your validator? And then you should also could see like, okay, hey, which validator did provide which tooling or which value. You should see that. And then I'm coming to your point where you said like, hey, should a validator just like build something on their own to get more delegation? Maybe, maybe not. I think that's like a bonus, value adding thing. Could be clearly, I would also prefer like having like this kind of group or this kind of party where like, hey, I want to build something like that. Who wants to help me? And then building together something, and then you coming in the right direction and bringing value for the whole ecosystem and working together. Because maybe I have an idea, but I can't like execute it because I'm lacking of the tech. Maybe I have the idea, and then you coming and completing my idea, and in the end we have like way more value. And then I'm coming back to what Daniel said, like, hey, should we limit the validators? Like, hey, every validator should have the same size, and I don't think so, because like, of course, you should like give the validators somehow incentive for that, what they're doing, and you should also give the delegator the chance to select the validator and say like, hey, I want to help him more, he is providing more value in my opinion. But maybe we should think about like somehow a cap and say like, hey, no validator should have more than 20% or 25% of the whole chain, because that would again endanger the whole ecosystem or the chain. But then you're coming back again like, hey, you have to trust your validator, and there's no KYC process in a validator business, right? So if, for example, we saw that with Takumi and Game, they had like 2 validators as well. If you just say like, okay, hey, we have now a cap, and you say like, hey, I'm contributing so much, I could just set up a new validator and a new name, and then bring that up again, so you would have the same problem again. So I think it all comes down to communication and transparency, and I think we should enforce that somehow, and building some common lines and rules that we all agree, that we all like transparent about our things, and communicate clear with the delegators and other validators.
So do you mind if I show one more thing on here? Not to show this too much, but this was like another thing that Pokeshoe has built. So this is like this thing that I was saying of kind of like this automated kind of like delegation thing. A lot of kind of like, and so it's like if you click on like someone's profile, it kind of like shows a lot of these things like fairly explicitly, and so this is just like a bunch of information coming from this like back end of things, but it's like a bit of information of like when did they kind of like first join, like when did they kind of actually kind of like, when was the last time they got like nominated is like delegated in the Polkadot language and stuff, but it's like also just like, okay, how many like democracy votes did they do? And so it kind of like explicitly kind of like gives a bunch of like scoring on here kind of like based on these things. Yeah, so this is all like fully automated, and this is also kind of like everything kind of like comes from either like the chain itself or kind of just like some kind of other things like this. So I definitely think a lot more like block explorers and a lot more kind of like apps and dashboards and things like this can do a bit better in terms of actually kind of like looking at what like just more kind of like information about this. But also like one thing that the Web3 Foundation was working on recently was a bunch of like research into kind of like decision making, and in the sense of kind of like a lot of, because like the process of actually having like delegators choose things, it's like the role of a delegator is like it should be a very active one, and like I think the language that like should be used a lot more is kind of like the role of a delegator should be like almost as active as a role as kind of like a validator, just because like they need to look at what their current delegations are. It's like they should like check up on them like time over time. It's like they shouldn't just like do this once and just like forget about it. It's like you should kind of like check up on like who you're actually like delegating to. Is this person actually like doing things that are good? Like what is actually kind of like happening there? And so one thing that the Web3 Foundation was working on was kind of like this. I don't know what it's kind of like behavioral theory, like economics, this kind of stuff, in terms of like decision making. And so there's a bunch of like algorithms that kind of like exist where it's kind of like right now we're kind of trying to build better interfaces and better like a staking dashboard. And so what would happen is like in this workflow process of like selecting who to nominate, it'll like show you say like two different things, and it will show you kind of like the factors of both. And it asks you like, okay, which one do you prefer, like this one or this one? It goes through this like 6 times, and by the end it like suggests to you like a list of like people that you should like delegate to, kind of like based on those factors. And the thing is though, it doesn't show kind of like which things it's like testing you on sort of. It just shows kind of like, here's the 2 people and here's a bunch of the things that they have. It's like choose which ones that you think are kind of like better. And so kind of like based on that, it kind of like shows you kind of this list of things. And I think it's interesting to see at least kind of like, this helps people understand, I guess, kind of like better what they actually value, I guess. And I would love to see kind of like more of this actually kind of like happen in terms of just like better interfaces for things, like better kind of just like products and UIs and applications. And so, yeah.
So, and it also actually comes back to the thing of involvement of stakers and the way we can encourage that. So yeah, but actually we've been building a UX solution for not only for staking, but all the just general kinds of use cases. And it's been kind of hard to actually get the delegated involvement. So what we've done back in today, so we did this randomization thing. So once you wanted to stake something, we show you a random set of validators each and every time. So you're not doing this like first side, first click. So yeah, I would get it back to the governance thing by any chance.
Yeah. One other sort of general topic of discussion is like how, and this is like a little bit more abstract and zoomed out, like beyond just the issues of like how do we decentralize more and like get good stake to good validators, is this question of like, do we feel like the design of governance systems within proof of stake are like effective from the very beginning? Like, when we talk about traditional like congresses and democracies, you don't have Congress people like within a chamber competing with each other over votes, right? And that's the exact situation we're in with proof of stake, right? Like we're all competing, we're all cooperating, but we're actually like, sometimes it feels like by design of the system, we're actually competing more than we are cooperating. Like it really is zero sum. So I wonder if there's like any interest in like trying to think of ways that maybe like another layer could be built on top of the governance structure, or like there could be sort of blue sky thinking about, is it possible we could design governance systems that encourage cooperation a little bit more? Yeah. Financial incentives? I don't know. I mean, like, I think you have to remove that zero sum thing where like all capital can be shifted to all different representatives, because otherwise it's always going to be this zero sum thing.
Are you talking about that validators consolidate themselves into these political parties, I guess?
Well, like think about it.
They all vote together. They're not competing with each other. Maybe they do what Arthur was saying is like the smaller validators like band together and then they like help each other out. They like redelegate to other smaller validators. They share resources.
And then we have in a position, right?
Yeah, they'll be like a little faction.
Or the fact that, like, I guess to paint an example where we don't have this issue is like if you have 2 districts where each district elects a representative, and they, you know, those 2 representatives along with the rest of the representatives for the various districts, you know, form a chamber. Like this guy doesn't have to worry about losing his seat to this guy, right? He has to worry about some other person who's running in his district in the next election cycle, right? But, you know, we obviously have to deal with that issue as validators where, you know, if we do a bad job as a validator, that stake is probably going to go somewhere. And it's probably going to go to somebody who's, you know, competing with us. So, yeah.
Even with that stake, is that efficient? Because like, I don't know how many of you guys were also Ethereum validators when the Beacon chain launched, but right, there were validators. There was a validator that maybe I won't name, but like they got slashed like 75 times in a row, right? And if that is the case of like how delegations are supposed to move, they were still receiving delegations, and they were one of the largest Ethereum validators, despite like their shortcomings. I feel like it's also a psychology thing, or maybe the branding, or their good BD, or the relationships that they've been able to build with institutional partners. But yeah, I think that they're these let's say validator redelegation or how stake moves is very inefficient still. I don't, but maybe if there is like this district example, or like the type of people that you do have to compete with is sort of consolidated into separate sort of battlefields or smaller battlefields, then maybe that might make more sense. I don't know what the districts would be in crypto. Maybe it's location. I don't know, but.
I think what you're saying is like, first of all, we have to distinguish each validator there, because there are different kind of validators, right? You have like validators, they're like institutional grade, they're like super huge, and they're just providing services for maybe institutional investors. First of all, that. Then you have like smaller teams, they're working like together with 5 to 10 people. Then you have like super small teams, they're like maybe a team of 3, and then you have like these individual teams. Like they're fighting for each own. For example, Larry, he's like a guy by his own, and that's it. So maybe here you can split up, because the guy who runs the node by himself, he can never compete with for example, stakefish or Chorus One, Citadel One, whatever, because first of all the resources are not there that he can run maybe 20 nodes at once. That's impossible. You have to check every day for updates. You have to check, okay, is my node running? Okay, you have to check what is this discussed in the groups, and so on and so on. So if you just do that, you can't even build like additional things on top. So there are shortcomings. So you maybe have to split that in different groups, like, as I said, like big tier, small, medium, whatever, and then you can go from there.
Basically, I didn't agree with you, because, as for example, Larry can compete with, like, particularly with Terra, can compete with Overstake, like with Stakefish or anyone else, because as soon as Larry, like, as for example, starts from the very beginning, everyone around the ecosystem knows that Larry is the exact person who working on like 24 hours per day or 7 days per week. That's why you have to delegate to them, not for like Everstake or Stakefish or any other validators. So if we take a look at a particular chain, there is always, even right now, there is always at least like 5 small or medium validators. They, without any marketing and without doing nothing, but they have some small retail stake, because these guys already like long time in the market, in this particular blockchain market. So that's why, yeah, you're right that we have to divide in some areas. But sometimes there is 5 or like 3 or 10 small validators that could, like with a like 2 guys team or 3 guys in a team, that could beat huge guys, because huge guys don't put all eggs into one basket and try to be decentralized. Speaking about assets, and as for example, look at like us or like a Stakefish or etc. We didn't focus on like one particular chain. We focused on like at least for 15 or 25 chains. First point. Second point, comparing huge validators that working on with institutional staking is totally different than guys who are working on the retail, because if you're working on institutional, you sign a contract with these guys, and you know what and or how they want to vote for. You just have to call them or just return the message. If you're working on with like a lot of like thousands of retail guys, you have no idea what they want. So it's totally different stuff.
And the delegations are sticky.
Yeah. So
they stay for 3 to 5 years or 1 to 2 years.
Yeah. So like if we can divide some validators, it could be like huge institutionals, huge B2B, then medium, with like 10 guys in a team, focus on like from 1 to 5 chains. Then another part, like one guy team working on with only 1 chain or up to 2, and then small teams that growing on and will be some medium team in like maybe years because they're growing. So it's a totally different approach for all of them, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, something like that. Exchange didn't pay any attention to governance at all. Like,
I think to enforce that, and coming also back to the governance aspect, is like I wrote about that like somehow in my paper as well, and I thought about it like, hey, what happens if, for example, one company or one centralized exchange have a lot of stake and they never vote? They basically, sorry to say that, fucking up the whole chain, because you never can vote or put a governance proposal out again because you will never reach the quorum, right? So this entity controls the whole chain. So, but what if you implement something that said like, hey, if you didn't vote in like the last 3 votes, your vote power will decrease, for example, like that. Or if you didn't vote in the last 5 to 10 governance proposals, you are not able to vote again for a year or half year, something like that, like these kind of penalties. And then the people will be enforced to participate. And if they get like penalty, it will be a remark, and then the delegators will also know, okay, hey, this guy don't participate, he get punished.
Yeah, agree with you, but first point didn't work, already tested. Second point could work. Like first point, it was with EOS, I guess. When you didn't vote for some long period of time, it's decreasing the vote power, and nobody paying attention. And I saw maybe 1 year ago, it was Icon blockchain. They implemented, right now implementing a slashing. So if the node goes down, you're slashed. If like something else, you're slashed. And if you pass at least 1 governance vote, you're also slashed. So I have no idea how it works, but we'll see with Icon blockchain.
I didn't get it, sorry.
So yeah, 1 point. If you, let's imagine that you're a huge exchange like a Binance, and if you miss some governance vote, like a validator, you will be slashed. So that's all. So if you missed, you will like lose some part of your money, like 5% of a bond or something like that.
But if you go from slashing, like from losing money, just like in voting rights, and they lose that, and then you see like, hey, if delegators really pay attention and say like, hey, I want to delegate to people, they vote and they care about the system, then I can redelegate.
Yeah, of course, and you relate to other guys who work for.
Exactly.
Are you punishing the delegate? So, right, there was a conversation that we had at Austin a few months ago where we had a similar workshop with some US-based validators, and it was coming from a point of maybe malicious compliance to or malicious action. So if we all understand that these centralized exchange validators are not voting and they're just like free riding, they just do the infra management and they don't participate in governance. I think like you're probably describing what happened on Kava when like we couldn't get a infrastructure upgrade through and because we couldn't hit quorum, and we actually had to pass another proposal to reduce quorum and then do the upgrade again, which is right ridiculous. Like we like briefly just entertain the thought, right? If these centralized exchange validators are not voting, you can force them to vote by, we can implement an upgrade to the chain or pass something that says we'll take all your money away, right? We'll like zero them. But like but the thing is, right, for these centralized exchange validators, who maybe you can see that maybe have no self-stake, we're actually punishing the people that unwittingly like maybe just like had their staked assets on their chain, right? Because sometimes these exchanges, they offer the option for you to like stake. Sometimes they'll do it without your consent, right? They'll just stake it and then give you access to certain balances. Like it's a great idea, but right, by punishing them or slashing them or like giving them like less, like it's the people that get hurt. And then if it, maybe your point was, if the people are getting hurt, right, because they're not paying attention, and then they'll be encouraged to redelegate to other validators, then we've hurt the people that we don't want to hurt instead of actually punishing the entities that are supposed to be responsible for that.
Also, just as a quick question to you, like if you lose the voting rights, would that get reconcentrated to other people who are more active voters?
Yeah, you can either contribute it equally or say like, okay, just split it up like the percentage how it is right now. If the first guy has 15%, he gets 15% of the other votes, for example. Just a concept. And coming to your question that you asked me, what would be your approach then to punish, for example, the sexes? The sexes. That's the first question I want to say. And then a little remark, like, I was like not really speaking from the economical perspective, or like I think we have to divide that from the economical perspective with the assets and the voting rights, because the voting rights really affect the growth and the development of the network, and the economical side is like more the retail, or like the people they are interested in the money, right? And you need somehow also the sexes to onboard new people for your chain, because we have to admit we are not that mature that we don't need sexes. We need sexes to onboard fresh money, fiat money, or like for new people to come into the ecosystem. Because if I tell now my mother, hey, you have to download Kepler and then you have to register there and this and that, she's out. She don't know even how to start a PC. Like, there you have to distinguish that. So how would you punish a sex?
Maybe not much. Maybe we don't include them in quorum. So if centralized exchanges are not in the quorum set, right, they don't count towards that, then we can have that. Or if they haven't voted for a long time, we don't include them in quorum. Yeah. I don't know. These are just like off my.
I was worried about passing them, like redelegating voting power would then could create a large concentration of people having now immense power that they might have not had because it was financially not possible. I was worried about that.
Or you can inverse it maybe, okay? If you say like the last guy gets like higher percentage as the first guy, and then you get like even a better playing field.
I didn't advertise ICANN approach, but there is a punishment not of customers' money, but their own money. You have to put their own money, like a bond, like in Tezos, the same ICANN doing, and we'll see what happens. Because there is a Binance in a second, maybe a third in the list, and there's a huge bunch of ASICs. And it will be like, at least once a quarter is a vote, so we'll see what happens in like half of the year. But I'm not sure if Binance lose like 5% of their bond at once, they will definitely vote.
They will hire a person to.
Well, so fun story. I actually used to work at Binance. That was a whole weird, wacky experience in and of itself. But well, the way that like exchange staking usually works is that like when people will kind of like stake on like the exchange like products, not actually like staking on chain. It's just kind of like the UI kind of like just making a good product experience that kind of like abstracts out all the weird difficulties of like bonding periods and like all those kinds of things. And so usually it's kind of like on the exchanges side to actually just kind of like manage kind of like risk and kind of like determine like, okay, how much of our cold wallet should we stake and how much of our like hot wallet should we stake, and kind of like managing kind of the things that way. But generally it's kind of like the people that stake on exchanges and therefore contribute to like the stake of exchanges are people that don't really care about governance in general anyways. It's like they're mostly there just because they just want returns. They just want like APY for things. And so in this way, it's kind of like their votes probably like wouldn't really matter anyways. Like they don't really care. And so it's kind of like in general, it's like the pool of funds that are like actually being staked with exchanges are like just non-active, kind of like very passive kind of stake anyways. But also like one thing that kind of we were like looking into for kind of like core Polkadot protocol work was like this notion of kind of like decaying votes. And so sort of similar to like what you were saying was like over time it's like your vote say it's like you delegate to like a validator. It's like your vote kind of decays over time unless you explicitly kind of like re-vote for them, or if you kind of like set the amount of like bond that you're like bonding for this. And so this could be one way of doing that. Like it's up to, I guess, kind of like the core protocols to actually like implement these things or determine if that's right. But it's kind of like voter apathy is kind of like it's a hard thing to solve, and it's kind of like, okay, how do you actually kind of like get people to care about these things? I don't know, but.
Just wanted to do a quick one, and it kind of goes into traditional finance. I think a lot of asset managers now have accumulated through ETFs and funds a lot of voting power in stocks, and I think they're having to face this issue of, do they vote on many of these passive investors? And a lot of them say no, like we're going to take a much more passive stance. But I think maybe that can speak to the value, like the commons is like, through a lot of transparency and education, like things like climate has now like forced sort of investors to tell BlackRock and some of these asset managers to be more proactive. So I think if you can bring more transparency, you might bring a more natural and better way to get Binance to be more active, and that comes from the users now understanding that they have all this power, that voting actually exists. You know, there might be a lot of users that don't even understand what their coins come from, and I think maybe that's like that kind of education can help sort of drive that in a much more natural way.
A lot of people don't understand economics and inflation and everything.
Nothing, like they just stake against money.
Yeah, two quick things. One, voting just in general, like if you look at the United States government, like there's whole campaigns to get regular people to vote in, government, and people don't even vote in their local elections. So that's a whole issue within itself. So getting people to vote on like their, things that their cryptocurrencies that they stake with is another problem. But second, does anybody know, has anybody attempted to reach out to these large exchanges, or what are some failed efforts that you guys know of that has? Okay, I'm just curious.
No, just quickly, like we are all the last 15 minutes we have been like talking about punishing the validators or the delegators if they don't vote, but why we don't like we have something like force or encourage, incentive them to vote. For example, actually the staking reward on Atom is like 15-17%. Why we, for example, at the beginning of the staking, they begin with 10%, and for each vote they do, they gain like 0.5, 1% until they reach like the 15 or 17%, and if they don't vote, they go back to 10%, for example. I think as you mentioned with in United States the voting, I think if you see the result very quickly of your decision with voting, people will take it more seriously. And also we are talking about money, so we all know that people are greedy, and if you have like the carrot, the candy. After the vote, I think a lot of people even exchange 2 or 3% from billions of dollars is a lot of money. So even them will try to vote, or as she say, hire people to make research. I think in general we should try to incentive.
Jimmy doesn't talk much.
Yeah, I think this can be applied at the validator level, because if you do at the delegator level, people will just vote randomly without really thinking about it. They will just vote yes on everything, or abstain on everything, or veto on everything. That's more fun. And but instead, if you do at the validator level and you change the APR of that specific validator, this may work, because if you're a validator, you cannot just vote randomly. You need to vote in a good way, otherwise everybody will say, oh, you're voting bad. So maybe this can work at a validator level.
Apply that because like the staking APR and the inflation is like not fixed usually, and secondly, you just can't predict how many governance proposals coming up. So if you say like each proposal gives like a certain percentage, you can do that because you don't know if next year there are like 100 proposals on Cosmos or like 5. So these are factors you have to take into account. Yeah.
No, you just like stop at 70% and that's it. You don't get 1% or indefinitely.
Yeah, I tend to be on the opposite side of this particular issue because I feel like even validators will probably like just abstain if they don't want to put the time into actually voting. And so then you'll just be back at square one. I don't know if that would actually occur, but that's how you don't get. Yeah, but okay, but maybe the problem is the quorum then, not necessarily the fact that people don't vote. One idea I had was that the problem might be that we are expecting the people who care about returns to also be the same people who care about government, and that these just might be different people, and that there's no mechanism for the people who care about returns to delegate their vote to people who care about government. Like these are one role. Yeah. It's a little bit like when we talk about returns, it's usually referring to like infrastructure. So you've got like governance and infrastructure, and these are sort of, like we've mentioned earlier, like one responsibility within the way proof of stake is generally implemented. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. In traditional government, like security tends to correspond to infrastructure. And security you might think of as being like police and military. And those systems are completely separate from civic governance, which is, obviously corresponds to governance in blockchain. So I think like long term, I'm really optimistic about the idea of potentially starting to separate. Like one very minimal way of doing that might be to make it possible on proof of stake networks to redelegate as like an official on-chain transaction. So you could say, hey, Binance, you don't seem to vote with your stake very much. If you redelegate to us, we will vote for you. You'll get most of the returns, and you won't suffer any ill will from the community for not voting. But that's not possible right now, at least in a non-custodial way, just because the networks don't support it. So it's possible that just more technology could potentially open up like doors to solving this problem where like everybody's voting, because if you're not voting, you're like, you might as well redelegate to somebody else who's gonna take a nominal fee to vote.
Maybe a provocative question is voting on governance task or responsibility of a validator or of a delegator? Because in the end, of course, a validator gives the direction, says like, hey, I have a better understanding usually because I'm like more in the tech and I know what's happening, so I can indicate the direction or an opinion. But in the end, it should be also the responsibility and the task of a delegator to know what's happening and to vote in governance, right? Because in the end, the delegator has the right to override the decision of the validator. So we should also maybe discuss that and look how to enforce like native voting of delegators.
You mean like people staking to begin with?
One thing that's interesting to me, at least, is just like seeing the differences of like Cosmos things and like Polkadot things. Because in the protocol, like by default for Polkadot, it's like staking and like governance are kind of two separate things. It's like when you delegate your like staking to a validator, like it doesn't default like the vote to the validator, and so it's like people need to like explicitly delegate their votes as well, like additionally if they want kind of that to actually happen. And so the differences though is that it kind of like creates this thing where it's like most people don't actually really care as much to like do that. Like not as many people actually do that. And kind of like one thing that I'm trying to incentivize more with kind of this like scoring thing here is that like as part of the scoring factor is that like people that have more people explicitly delegate governance votes to them, like that increases their score more. And so to me, it's just interesting, like the factors of like protocol level kind of stuff and like kind of like how those kind of differ and how that kind of works. It's like in Cosmos, they're very intertwined, and that just kind of leads to like just different behavior like by the community and also by delegators, I guess. So.
You also see the difference in the communities. For example, UNO has like a huge percentage of active people voting, right? And that was due to the fact of the huge controversies with the whale and so on. Like they have 95% or something like that. 99. Like that's amazing, and that's like what a community should look like. And that's not because like each validator is voting, it's also because like the individuals are voting, and if you look in other ecosystems, the voting percentage or the participation is way lower, so this should be also taken in a case.
And requires the architectural choice for the delegator side. So because when I just like when the person is generally is not so involved in the space, like in the, even if I'm staking, I don't know, region, not necessarily that I know anything about region. So, and thus far, it also loops back to the education thing. So, I don't think,
Education is a really huge factor. Like in my survey that I did, I find out that like a lot of people don't even know what POS is and how
absolutely.
it works.
Yeah, I've been running a research on governance in Secret Network specifically because Secret has its own like very active, very specific people in there because it's also regarding the private contracts and the privacy, and people are very like pumped about that. So they're anarchists in a sense. And so what I found out is they really do pay attention to the governance itself. So it means that the community can be actually like very involved in the thing. So they take into account the contribution, they take into account the uptime, the technical setup of Validator, not even speaking about the general facts like commission, community presence. So the channel of communication should be also like established. And the thing is, I do believe there is a way to nudge. So what I mean by the architecture of choice is that, like, let's say there is a, I don't know, cover. They can establish a kind of a highlights scene for various validators or anything, or on the Explorer level, website level, they just highlight the, the most, I don't know, voters, like highlight the most contributors, highlight the thing that people should be paying attention to, because not everybody knows about the POS, DPOS, like different types of POS or whatever. Not everybody knows about the technical setup, but what they do, why they invest in some specific coins. They do check the website, they do check the Explorer sometimes, like a more advanced level. So that's something on a foundation side probably to nudge them to do like due diligence while staking or anything, if they're choosing to stake in a non-custodial way, because a lot of money is actually coming from centralized exchanges, because staking may be the term that you just deposit some money and get the return back, which is like not even distinguished as a, so they manage it, it's a custodial stake.
Key metrics is APR. They just like, oh yeah, I get 100% APR, and then they don't take into consideration inflation is 300%.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a very like fun topic because I've been trying to speak to absolute non-people about staking, and they're just like, so I'm staking USDT, and they have no idea what staking is, what's the consensus mechanism. it's like nonsense. Like my mom is invested in crypto. Does she know how Bitcoin is different from gold? I don't think so. Absolutely. And education, guys. Everybody, as soon as like there is a committee or something, it's possible to establish a kind of an audience that highlights a lot of things that are definitely kind of important for choice.
Definitely. Education. I feel like that's like something everybody can get behind, is putting more money towards getting the word out that governance matters on blockchains. Yeah. All right. I think we're going to end on that note. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Oh, yeah.
So actually, like, okay. So there is a guy, a very active guy. You may know him from Russian community. Is post-human. He's been making like a lot of videos regarding the Cosmos and the Cosmos ecosystem. He's just like a very active enthusiast from the like Cosmos ecosystem and beyond. And he was just coming up to Chizat like and asking him on this last Paris blockchain week, and he was asking him like why Binance is not working for Cosmos proposals, and Chizat was like, oh, we'll keep it handled. I mean, let's find someone to take head of it. So, and basically he found a girl that was like managing some community stuff, and she understood nothing, and so he's been applying for that, and he's been running some Twitters, I guess, and writing some emails to Chizat and Binance team. Nothing ever. Oh, he's here. Oh my God, he's here. Yeah, he's right there. Yeah, yeah.
There.
I was just talking about you. Hello.
It's so nice to see you. I know you 2 years, and first time we meet in the material world.
Like, it's so funny. I was just talking about you. I was like talking about this Chizat. Hello. I was just talking about this Chizat story.
Of course, yes.
That's so
where
funny.
we can sit?
Yeah, you can sit here.
Yeah, this is the Validator Workshop.
Oh, it's nice. We are the Validator. That's nice that we are here. We are Validator Post-Human. We validate mostly Cosmos chains. We are Cosmos ecosystem maximalists. And we are dreaming of moving all Web 2 to Web 3. And we do think that the Cosmos is the easiest way to move Web 2 to Web 3. If you have any question, I will glad to answer.
Did I get a chance to have an answer from the Chizat about the voting stuff in Cosmos?
I made a research about the votings and the process of the governance. And I think it's not the only problem of Cosmos ecosystem, it's problem of the all proof-of-stake networks. So what was the main critics from proof-of-work to the proof-of-stake? They was telling, oh, when you have the stake, you can, some person who have a lot of money will come, buy a lot of tokens, will stake these tokens, and will create the proposals and take the control of the proof-of-stake network in the interest of the small rich group. And on 50% they was right, yeah, really, very rich people come and stake a lot of tokens like a Binance, Kraken, we can see. But second half, totally wrong, because Binance don't vote. Kraken don't vote. They really not interested in the process of the voting. Why they not interested in the process of the voting and why it's a problem? At first, to change something, when I create the proposal, I want to change something. And I understand, if this proposal will pass, something will change in my life. But imagine that you are a very rich guy, kind of the Binance, you are on the yacht with a lot of cocaine, helicopters, and some person come to you, friend, we have a proposal, let's update Starport 3.8 to the new version 4.2. And you say, like, it's something not work? You say, it will be much more better. Oh, I don't have a time. It's just 8 clicks. who I need to pay that this person make 8 clicks for me. Like my yacht is here, I want to. So rich people, big players don't want to participate in the voting because they don't really understand for what it's needed. And we can see it by the one of the proposal when one of validator looks like Harvest tell let's decrease the payment for the creation of the pool of liquidity from the 40 atoms to the 5 atom. The turnout for this proposal, voting 99% yes, 1% no, kind of this, but turnout 19%. So most of the validators even wasn't vote. They don't see the difference between 40 atoms or 5 atoms. For them it's the same. Like if you are very rich, for you no difference between $1,000 or $100. So you don't think that it's even the problem. So it means that we lose this possibility to change the network, to update the network. How we lose it? The question is how many people need to participate in the voting for proposal that even those who wasn't participating accept the results. For example, we are 100 people, 5 of them go to the corner and say, we have the proposal. 3 for yes, 2 for no, by the result, 60% yes, 40% no. Will this proposal pass? Of course, no. The other 95 people will say, we really don't care what you are created by the 5 people there. So it must be 20%, 40%, 50, 75. We understand, never 100%. Like it's, somebody can be in the hospital or kind of this. So which person or which quorum we need that these proposals will be legitimized, kind of, I don't know this word in English. So why other need to accept this proposal? When the big players don't vote for the proposal, more harder and harder get quorum. Good chain, good network make participants more rich and more rich with any time. More rich people became, more apathy they have to the voting process, less they vote and chain stop to be updated. So the question of the governance need to be based not on this economical and social connection between the economical power, how much tokens I have, that's are economical tokens, and this is in the same time, it's a voting power. We need to divide it somehow, because most of the people who come to our networks for the economical stuff, they are interested only in APR. Why they start to vote for the proposals? Because we incentivize them to vote for proposals. Like with Juna, we say, we make a drop of neta, those who just stake will get 0.5, but those who vote for all the proposals will get 16 neta, like 32 times bigger. And what we get? People say, oh, I was so stupid that I wasn't participating in the proposals. Now I will participate in all proposals. From one side, good. From other side, what we get? Next time, new proposal, some person tell, let's implement COSM, WASM smart contracts. Other people look and say, this is kind of our concurrence. Those who will vote no with veto will get from me a drop. And now I can, with such incentives, make a manipulation of the governance. It's kind of those people who will vote for this proposal, yes or no, will get NFTs from me. And people will go and vote to get NFTs. And I can mean these NFTs, any amount. This is like, and this is for, kind of free for me. So I can make a manipulation by the results, by the promising of the drop for the results. And this is also the biggest problem. Also, one of the problems that we see that we can, but I think that it's not a bug, it's a feature. And a lot of people was voting, no with veto, don't use our model for the governance as the marketing. But it's a kind of to tell, stop to use the guns to shoot, or kind of. This is the tool. It's not important how to vote, yes or no with veto. We just open the box of Pandora, because we understand now that the governance model of the Cosmos can be used not only for the governance, and it's very good that it's cyber show to us, because it's our friend, because it can be like this. The proposal, enjoy Coca-Cola, yes, no with veto, with logo. Like, this is the link on our webpage. Why the Coca-Cola company don't do it? Because they don't understand nothing in the digital marketing. They are totally from the centralized paradigm, and they don't do it just because they don't understand how it works. But one time person like me will be in their marketing part, you will see in the mean scan the top validators will be with Coca-Cola logo. This is not really hard to do, and and also sometimes the quality of validators. Some of the validators interested in own economical interest, that they easily will change the logo on the Coca-Cola if Coca-Cola will pay to them. Okay, I provide the security and making money. This is okay. So. I'm sorry that maybe it's too long, but I want to show some real big dangers that we will meet very soon. So, and how we can prevent it, how we need to divide economical part from the social part of the blockchain, because we need to liberate these rich people who come for the APR, not for the voting, and they will say, "Phew, I don't need to vote anymore." For them it's hard. They come to make money, and after they say, why we have no and no with veto? What's the difference? Too much options. Like, it's like liberate me. It's freedom not to choose. This is the best. I don't need to choose anymore. It will be like this. So who need to choose? The professional people, kind of the real governance, the active members with the burning hearts and empty pockets. Because if they too rich, they have apathy to the voting. It's for what I need to change something if already everything good. So these people need to get the tokens about the governance, but they don't give you any economical possibilities, no APR or something like this, but they give to you a possibility to spend the community pool funds, to pay for developers, or maybe I can even create the proposal. Friends, I'm here 24 hours with you every day building the community. Proposal, pay me like $1,000 to pay for my internet or something like this. I'm like full-time here. So it can be even like this. And economical people will have this economical token. They will get APR, pay fees in this, participate in the DeFi, blah, 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 and don't think about who. And pay taxes, kind of. All the time they make the transaction, part of this, like exchange, go to community pool, and community can govern the network. Of course, very nice solution also to who will be in this community, who will be these people who can decide and will get this token that give you only a right to vote. It will be any active member of the community who is not, but if the economical part is against all this, like a 7% or 7% of validator tell this person don't need to be in the governance, get out. In the governance of the network must be people who are agreed by everybody. I can't say nothing bad about this guy, and about this guy I can say something bad. It's more bad about person, kick out. So you need to have a good reputation, try to be polite, that everybody like you, blah, 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 blah. So, and as this way, we will have changing of it's impossible to that everybody like you. You come to the community governance, doing something. In one moment, like 7% of the economical validators tell, he's bad, kick out, new person come. Oh, new person is new, until he do some bad, kick out. We will have changing of the governance, and we can update the network very fast. And next question, the last. When we have the proposal about updating of the code, we understand that most of the people even not developers. Most of the people, we say, we want to update this code, this is the link on the IPFS, this is our GitHub. People come and say like, okay, how I need to vote? Like the most of the people vote. If most people vote yes, I vote yes. Because most of us not developers. How we decide the marketing proposals? Most of the people not the marketologists. They just, it's kind of, let's decide how we will teach kids in the school by the physics. And 150,000 old school grannies say the atom reaction need to go by the God will. And it's a lot of old grannies and a little physician students, physician professors and others. They will lose in this voting. But we don't need to listen a lot of people who don't understand physician and the questions about physician. We need to listen some experts. So proposals about the code need to be accepted or created by the developers. Proposals about marketing need to be decided by the marketologists. Because if developers will vote for proposals about marketing, everything will be looks like GitHub. This is nice, 2 colors, nothing more, the best. So yeah, we understand that it's a totally different visions. So we need kind of the committees. So community can choose. This is committed of the marketologists, this is community of the developers, this is community of the, I don't know, any question. And this small group can vote inside, get some proposal, and after this proposal will pass if nobody disagree. Because if more than 5% of all community tell, no, I don't like it, group of professionals need to find another solution that 97% say, even don't sell. We don't need to vote for yes. We need to care about keeping this everybody happy. So it means for us it's important that nobody is disagree. If nobody is disagree, nice. If 5% or 7% disagree and dislike, can be destroying of the social structure and make more conflicts and other things. So let's care about those who. It means that one no with veto, it's much more dangerous than 90% of yes. Like everybody agree, it's a common situation, but one person no with veto, it's like, why you are no with veto? It's something, it means like, I'm ready to leave you. I'm ready to stop to be a part of the community. I'm ready to destroy my social connection if you will accept it. So because of this, we need to care a lot. And about yes, it's like, everybody for yes for the something good. This is like not important. Merci.
Dan, if you don't want to say anything else, I'll end. Yeah.
I think you spoke a lot of what was on our minds already as well. The last part does sound a lot like the Polkadot's technical committee versus.
I mean, Secret Networks established the committees for governance, marketing, and everything like that. It's not that efficient, though. Not gonna lie. I mean.
But for the last part that you mentioned, isn't there your idea perfect? Like maybe
sub-jobs.
Yeah, committees. So I guess the call to action here today is to join a Discord where we're trying to get a lot of validators together and other just community members of the Validator Commons. We'll send that out on the Telegram group.
I don't believe you're on the Telegram group.
Yeah, we can get your info after.
Discord is IBC Sparks or no?
No, this is the Validator Commons. You can.
Yeah, we can get your info.
Yeah, will be very nice.
Yeah. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Maybe do one picture together.
Oh, it will be great.